play around with these assumptions all the time. Because when I meet new people and they ask me where I'm from, I do a little dance of white lies. And it goes something like this. If I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm going to talk to you for all of maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and you ask me, oh, hi, nice to meet you, chit-chatting, we go, where are you from? I'm from Chicago. That's it. I don't need to get into it. I don't need to explain myself more. And it's far enough away that I probably don't know too much about it, and I've lived there for a couple years, so I could probably answer some basic questions about it. But if I'm going to talk to you for about 5 or 10 minutes, that's enough. That's enough for now. If you're a friend of a friend in Boston, and I'm being introduced to you for the first time, I'm confident enough at this point to say to you, hi, I'm Steph. Yeah, I grew up in Singapore. And I'm bracing myself for the next question, which is usually, wow, your English is so good. And that's probably how I'd answer you if you were a friend of a friend and I'm going to talk to you for more than 10 minutes. But if I'm in Singapore, which is where I probably spent the majority of my life, about 10 to 12 years, and you ask me, where are you from? I will probably tell you Boston. Because when I'm in Singapore, it gets really confusing. If I'm in Singapore and I tell you that I'm from Singapore, you might question me about sort of why is my accent American, or all of these other things. Are my parents Singaporean? So that's the little dance that I lay out whenever someone asks me, where am I from? And in 2008, I graduated college. I went to Northwestern University in Chicago. And I had moved here to Boston. I started an internship with the Boston Globe and City. And I was just starting to meet people. And I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in a basement apartment, and I was living with 4 roommates. And we were at a party, hanging out, and whatever, and of course I was meeting some new people. And as you now know, I had a little dance of lies. And my roommate, Lynn, introduced me to someone, for me, thank you. And he said to this girl, he said, oh, I want you to meet my roommate, Steph. She's from Singapore. Well, the tricky thing is, the girl that he introduced me to, even though we were in Boston, Massachusetts, was from Singapore. She was Singaporean. So she gave me this like sneer, and then she kind of looked at me, and then she said, oh, you're from Singapore, born and bred? And then I had to like backtrack and kind of walk her through the whole story of how I was actually born in Hong Kong, and my mom's Canadian, and my dad's Chinese, and I'm a Canadian citizen, and then I lived in Taiwan for a little bit, and then I lived in Singapore for a long time, but I went to an international school, and that's why I speak English so well, and went to school in Chicago, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It took a while, and also the facade was sort of blown. And I think what the other tricky part about that situation was that when I was telling people in Boston that I was from Singapore, I was actually assuming an identity that wasn't really quite mine. Because as an Asian person, telling people, oh, hi, I'm Steph and I'm from Singapore, they immediately have assumptions that my parents are probably Singaporean, that I probably went to a local school, and that I probably immigrated to the US at some point. And that's not my story. That is the story of a girl who actually is from Singapore. She was born there. She's born and bred, as she asked me. So that really bugged me after that. After that exchange, I said, and I thought to myself, man, I was assuming someone else's identity, essentially. I can't really answer this question of where am I from? What the heck is going on? And I just graduated college, and I was just starting to figure out my life. So being a journalism major, I did what a journalist would do, which is I just started asking people questions, and I started interviewing people. And I started interviewing friends and friends of friends and asking them, what do you say when someone asks you where you're from? if you are a kid who went to international school, or a military brat, or a diplomatic kid, or you've just bounced around a lot, what do you say? As it turns out, my little dance of white lies is not so unique, and that many of them would say it too, and I'm sure many of you are probably thinking, oh, I kind of do this a little bit too. And so, in trying to figure out this question, I founded denizenmag.com, which is this online magazine that I run. And the very first article I published on it was called "The White Lies That TCKs Tell." And in it, I'm unpacking the question, where are you from? And as I was thinking more and more about this question of where are you from, I realized that when you meet someone for the first time and they ask you, where are you from? What they're really asking you is, who are you? Because every time I tell someone between what I look like and what my accent is and what I tell them where I'm from, they're able to, in broad strokes, assume a bunch of experiences that I've had, right? So the deep ditch experience that I just told you about, the summers on the Cape, maybe enjoying the Patriots story that I just told you, or I immigrated from Singapore. So when someone asks you where you're from, they're really asking is, who are you and how can I relate to you? And then they're also trying to understand what broad strokes of experiences can I draw from that I can talk to you about. So I think that for third culture kids, it is extremely, extremely important to figure out an answer for yourself for this. And it's not the answer where it's dance of white lies, and it's not the answer where you're making someone up for someone else, but really, truly, truly, within yourself, figuring out what is the question to where are you from and who are you. This is something that you need to figure out for yourself because it will guide you in your journey and moving forward in your life. I wanted to share with you a few stories about how people have explored the topic of where are you from or home. And I think that for a lot of people, and for me especially right out of college, home was this magical place that I envisioned, that I would feel comfortable, and I would feel safe, and I would feel like I was me, and I felt like I would belong. And it was this magical, warm place that is very heavily leaned on in popular culture, and in movies, and in advertisements, this concept of this place where you belong. And in college, I was reminded of this every Christmas break or every Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving especially, because over Thanksgiving, all of my friends would go home and go see their families and have this place to return to. And for me, as both an international student and a third culture kid, there really wasn't a place for me to go. Not only because my parents were far away, so it was just physically impossible to fly that far and just go for a day or two, but also because going back to Singapore or going back to Hong Kong wasn't really home anyway. It wasn't the kind of home that my friends who all went home for Thanksgiving experienced. And I felt so jealous about it, and I also tried to replicate it in different ways, where I would either maybe borrow a home, like I would travel home with a friend and just crash with them for Thanksgiving, or I would like grab a bunch of like international kids and we would do international Thanksgiving in the dorms, or like I was dating a guy for 1 year and I went home with him for Thanksgiving, so I was replicating it in all sorts of ways. So even though theoretically I understand that home may not necessarily be a physical place, the cultural implications of home and the way that people talk about home around me makes it feel so heavy that it needs to be this place as opposed to this concept that I live with. And I wanted to read two short quotes from two denizen writers. These are contributors to my magazine. They're two moments that they were feeling out of place in a physical place that they called home. So one of them, her name is Marie Gay, and she is a denizen writer who grew up in South Africa. but she left for Germany for a couple years and then came home. And this is what she wrote about her homecoming experience. Returning to your home country after years away is like opening your apartment's front door, and at first glance, everything looks the same. But then you notice the furniture, identical to when you last saw it, has been moved around. The bed is in the kitchen, the sofa is on the balcony, and all the dishcloths, which usually hang right there next to the sink, are pegged and signed softly on the tree outside. And everything feels real and unreal at the same time. The other passage I want to read to you is from a writer. Her name is Christina, and she's half Chinese and half German. And she lived in Hong Kong growing up in addition to a lot of other places, but she returned home, like physical place home to Hong Kong to work. And when she got there, her Chinese coworkers constantly talked about her behind her back, calling her a guailo or a foreigner. And she wrote in this essay for Denizen, I looked down at my food, not knowing what to do. She's at a restaurant where people are kind of talking behind her back. This is highly bizarre. I am accustomed to being spoken about as a foreigner in countries where I was born, but I belong here, don't I? I am half Chinese, half German, and I have never ever been anything else. And it never occurred to me that this would be an issue to other Chinese. We know in our heads that home doesn't have to be a place, but for some reason or another, we can't stop ourselves from trying to find this physical place called home. And I've been searching for this my entire life. And last year, I went through a really, really tough life patch. I think that all of you can remember a moment in time in high school or in college where life just got really, really freaking hard. And for me, it was literally this last February where my whole life turned upside down in 2 weeks. It was like everything, it was like my health, my work, my relationship, my family, like everything turned upside down. And it was like my whole life had been ripped up to shreds and thrown in confetti, and I was standing there and like everything was falling around me. And in this moment of deep distress, and I was like crying all the time, I stood there and all I wanted to go to was a place called home. Like the only place that I wanted to be was a place where I could feel comfortable, and a place where I could feel safe, and a place that I could feel welcome. But I was in my apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts, thinking there is no place that exists like that. There isn't a place for me to escape to. And I was exhausted and beaten down, and I was just like, holy crap, like, how do I figure this out? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? How do I sort this out? And piece by piece, by the sum of small efforts, I slowly started to figure it out. First, it was my friends, who were amazing, and they not only came over to hang out with me, they dragged me out of the house, they cooked me dinner, they really took care of me, and they were amazing. I started traveling a little bit, again, here or there, because I traveled a bunch as a kid, and it's something that I've always loved. I started taking a lot of photographs, because as a TCK, living lots of places, I not only loved taking pictures, but I also loved looking at pictures of places that I'd been. And I started writing. I started writing a lot, because that's what I've always loved to do. It's why I founded Denizen, and I started writing and editing and working on stories with third culture kids. And slowly but surely, I started to feel comfortable again, and safe again, and I felt like I was me again. And I realized that as I was searching for this mythical place called home, it was actually there all along as this concept that I knew, but I hadn't quite found yet. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out the pieces of my life that made me feel comfortable, made me feel whole, and made me feel safe. And for me, personally, it's this particular group of friends that I love to talk to. It's taking pictures, it's writing, and it's probably walking through the streets, and just being a traveler. Those are some feelings to me that feel like home. It's not a place, it's just spaces in my life. And in understanding that, I could start to unpack and figure out and explore and sort of develop my home, kind of like you would with an actual house. Like you might buy furniture or make it nicer or renovate it or build out your home in one way or shape or form. What I did was I found the pieces of my life that I really loved and I truly, truly enjoyed and made sure to invest time and effort and energy into that. So if there were these 10 or 15 friends that I was really close to that I loved, even though they weren't necessarily all in Boston, I would make an effort to talk to them on Skype, email them, Facebook them, because they felt like home. And even if I was super busy with work and life got super crazy, I would make an effort to sit down and write, because it made me feel like home. And if I was on a business trip and things got super crazy, sometimes I would just take a long walk and take pictures because it felt good to me. And these were all the little pieces for me that felt like home. So I think what I wanted to say was that I know that we have this idea that home is this magical, mythical place that you can find, but instead it is a magical, mythical place that is not so mythical, but is a magical place that you need to create for yourself. And I think that for third culture kids, this is critically, critically important because we have all kind of lived all over the place and we've been bounced around a lot. We've been bounced around our whole lives, and sometimes I worry that third culture kids don't stop and take a breath from all of the crazy places that they're traveling and places that they're going, to stop and take a breath and think about what does home mean to me and how can I spend some time in my life to carve that out and create this place for me. And why is that important? It's important because when life gets really, really hard, you're going to have to go back to that place to ground you and find strength. That is one reason. Why is it important for your career? Because eventually, after you graduate college, you will have to take some big risks in your life and in your career. And in order to be able to take risks, you're going to have to know that there's a safety net that will catch you when you fall. And the safety net may not be a place. It is just a space that you create for yourself in your life. And it's important to take risks because big risks give you big gains, especially in careers. And finally, the other reason why it's important for you to find this home and this space for yourself is because, especially now that you're probably finishing up college or you're thinking about moving out to the world, you will have to make some really tough decisions in your life about where you're going to go, where you're going to work, where you're going to live, who you're going to spend your time with. And in order to make really good decisions for yourself, you need to know what place you come from and who you are in order to make smart decisions for yourself. So I implore you to please take a moment, ask yourself, where am I from? Where is my home? Who am I? And how can I find it? And know that this is going to be a long journey, and it'll take a lot of effort, but in the end, the payoff will be great. Thank you for listening. And if you're interested, please visit denisonmag.com. It's my little home on the internet, and I welcome you all to come visit it. Thank you. So I believe I'm supposed to ask you for questions. Sure. Hi. Yeah, sure. My dad loves my website. He's all about it. He reads every article and comments on stuff. I think that my parents know that I'm very different from them, but I think that they embrace it for what it is. I think they try to support it in their own way. My dad especially, the way that he supports me is kind of on social media, which is hilarious. He comments on all of my Instagram and Facebook posts. And I'm sure some of you have noticed that as well. I live far away from him. He lives in Hong Kong. So we connect using social media and email. He sends me more Mashable articles than anybody I know. But yeah, they're very, very supportive. I just wrote a blog post a couple, like last week about like founding Denizen and that whole experience. It was a long time ago, it was 2008, and I looked back at old GChat logs and old email history to look at all the discussions. And I literally think it was just like a GChat conversation with like two friends, and we were just like throwing out all of these terrible ideas. And looking back at the names now, and I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't name the magazine that. But Denizen means a person who assumes the sort of like citizenship or identity of a place where they are currently. So it was a good fit, and it was better than like TCK magazine. So. Any other questions? Oh, yep. Yeah, Chicago. Very solitary, but it actually wasn't quite. Like, I was on the phone with my friends constantly, and hanging out with my friends, like all summer last year, I was probably out every single night with them. I think that figuring it out for yourself is solitary. I don't think that you can't use like outside things as a crutch, or have other people define it for you, or ask other people what they think it should be for you. I think that you need to figure that out for yourself. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't invite people into the space that you create. And I think that I really enjoy sharing what my vision of my home essentially is with my friends. And I actually, in terms of physical space, this is just like a decision that I made, but my apartment in Cambridge is decidedly very, very open. I actually have people over a lot, and I'm very social that way, so I enjoy like cooking for them and having them over and things like that. But still, like discovering home and that sort of like figuring out what works for you is pretty solitary in that sense. Yes.
How do you figure out or come to realize what works for you?
Figuring out, in the process of figuring out. Yeah.
Or do you still dance that dance the way you want it to start? Do you still plan to?
Yeah. I think that I still use the dance of white lines that I always have. I think that my definition of home is much more internal and for me. And I think that in terms of like in a conversation or at a party, I will use what works in this situation, because you kind of need to get through day-to-day life, and you can't take 30 hours to explain your life to everybody. But that's okay, because instead, I think that when I was doing it in 2008, I was doing a little dance, and I was kind of unsure of who I was and why I was doing it. And I think now I more fully understand like why I was saying certain things. And if I get caught in the why, I now know how to fully explain myself. Yeah, I think this is a journey that you all figure out. You know, it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you sort out as you get older.
Hi, Steph, I wanted to thank you for sharing your story, especially willing to be vulnerable with such a large crowd. As a non-TCK, is there a question that you would have us pose of you in lieu of where you're from, or I don't know, some question that you have a little less stress associated with it?
Yeah, I actually don't mind it, and maybe, I don't know, do you guys mind? I actually don't mind it anymore, because I'm sort of like, I'm used to it now, but do you mind it?
Sometimes I like it, especially when it hurts.
Yeah.
But a question that I have to do is that I prefer.
Oh, interesting. Oh, here.
Thanks, Steph. So the question that I prefer over where are you from is what's your story? Because you have so much more wiggle room there. You can do the whole my father's Thai, my mother's Dutch, lived here, or you could just share a story that would kind of display the different cultures that you've lived in, which might help others understand kind of the background or like the specifics. So yeah, that's it.
even if I do answer one way or another, you know, I think it doesn't define who I am, right? I think that it's something that people use to start to get to know me, and then from there they'll figure it out. And it's okay if it's just a 5-minute conversation and they don't, it doesn't bother me. And if it's a longer term friendship or whatever and I get to know them, then yeah, like, absolutely. Like, they'll start with knowing that I grew up in Singapore, and then they'll figure it out as we go along. I have some coworkers that just found out that I'm Canadian, like, not too long ago. They were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, isn't that crazy? Let me tell you that story. So. I do not have, I grew up as an only child, but I have an older sister, but she's 10 years older than me and she's half sister. So we didn't grow up together, but she is a sister. I just grew up mostly as an only child, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so my closest friend, she and I kind of grew up together. We like, I got to